Mr. Goodwin.
Thank you.
Yeah, Linda, is there any example of a right-of-way on property that is not a road? Where I have a right-of-way to use something on somebody else's property, whether it's,
There's, like utility right-of-ways and,
Yes.
and that sort of thing, but
There's also
I don't-
septic fields on the adjacent lots.
that's what I'm thinking, that, you know, if you've got a, like a water system, wastewater system or something, that, are we only concerned about roads, or are there other right-of-ways that we ought to go ahead while we're tackling this bad boy and we ought to look at?
Yeah. Easements instead of right-of-ways, you mean?
Yeah,
Easements.
an easement.
Yeah.
So you're saying a septic system that's on somebody else?
See, a subdivision has
Septic
got
system, wells.
their own septic system,
Right.
and so you've got an easement on that property for that, as part of the community septic system.
For example, if you had to maintain it, or you had to do something to it.
So, I'm not saying we should, I'm just saying, do we want to, while we got the book open, to take a look at all of it?
That might get a little weird, though, if you're doing the acre and a half and
But
then,
we require utility
Well,
easements
depending
around
on
all
where they
lots
place
and
it.
subdivisions.
And they might not
for,
be
like,
able to provide an easement to somebody without violating their acre and a half. Unless they get some sort of exemption from the board. Like I said, I haven't delved into this far enough, other than to just ask the question, have we covered everything by just saying roads that we want to cover?
At the time, I'm gonna say yes, because the other items haven't necessarily, I don't see them as a potential issue, because utility easements are required on subdivision lots around the perimeter of the lot. Most utility easements for your power companies, I doubt will ever become a separate parcel. I don't know that for sure. Tommy, if you wanna,
One of the things to consider, especially with REC, the majority of their easements are not recorded. So when you go to cut off a lot acreage, if you don't know what the width that they're using
right.
is, it could throw you in a bind. You know, if you're close, and you may have missed whether REC had a 30 or 40-foot easement. The only way you know is go to Bowling Green and dig through their stuff and see if you can find out. So when you start throwing utilities into it, then I think you're making it really complicated. Whereas if you just say access ways, you know, roads, that's one thing.
And then talking about utilities, any lakefront property would then, because the Dominion easement that's on most lakefront property would also throw an issue with a lot of parcels.
I'm just saying, while we're looking at this, is there anything else we need? I'm not even thinking about leasing.
Already seen.
Suppose I do a long-term lease to I don't know, let's say a tower. Does that count? Do we want to subtract that off of the acre and a half? Or not? Are we not concerned about that?
I think this is just about road right-of-ways.
Huh?
This is just about road right-of-ways in my mind's eye.
Well, that's my question. Are we only concerned about roads, or while we got it open, do we want to look at the totality of things that can take away from that lot size?
Not in my mind's eye.
I think it makes it too sticky if you put in the other stuff.
Too many unknowns,
Too many measurements.
yeah.
Okay, I just bring it up.
Surveying hit
Oh, good point.
it. Surveying hit it.
Yeah.
Then you got a lot width.
Can I ask a question about the next one? If we're done on this for a minute.
Let's move along.
Yeah. The private lane,
Lot
Lot width is
width.
next.
okay. I wanted to jump ahead so bad. All right, go ahead.
The lot width is the next definition, and we've added, if the lot width is not met at the required setback, the front setback becomes the point on the lot where the minimum lot width is met. And this is more problem on like a pie-shaped lot. Say on a subdivision street, you have a 40-foot front setback, but at 40 feet, your lot's only 100 feet wide, but your lot width requirement for R2 is 125 feet. So so that would make the building setback line at the point where the lot width is met versus the 40 foot. So it could push the setback line back on, but it's typically on lots like this. And that's the way it's been applied since before I came. But it's just never been in writing. So this is one of those unwritten policy determinations that we're just trying to get codified.
So your 1.5 starts at the point where the setback requirement is met.
So this isn't related to the acreage, it's related to the lot width requirement. So each zoning
Okay.
district has a specific requirement for the width of the lot.
I got you.
Right. So it would just push the setback line back to where it meets that lot width
Right.
requirement.
We're ready to go to a private lane here. Let's move on to private lane, satisfy Mr. Brooks.
I'm gonna go eat.
And that little picture you have is a cul-de-sac, I guess. I couldn't see it. No, the other one. Yeah, okay, got you.
So private lane is next. Mr. Brooks, you have a question?
We had when I was reading through it, I had questions about, one place it says less than 3 lots, another place says more than 2 lots. But I saw on page 14, in that definition, y'all made changes. So, to correct that. So on this page, go to 14. Less than 3 lots can be accessed. Lane serving less than 3 lots. So you took the 2-lot thing out to correct that situation, I'm assuming.
Page 14. Okay, I'm sorry, I finally found my pages. What, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I was just looking.
Okay.
Up at the top of private lanes on the first page in definitions, it says access way residential use in division of less than 3 lots only within a 50-foot deeded right-of-way. And then it says private lanes, down at the bottom, private lanes are not intended to serve subdivisions of more than 2 lots. So 3 lots can't be on a private lane?
Correct.
Correct. And then if you go to 14, page 14, saying the same thing there.
So you'll see on page 14, we marked through sub in front of divisions.
So just a division,
Correct.
3 lots on a division, 2 lots on a subdivision. Yeah,
2 lots, maximum of 2 lots is a division.
division,
Once you get to the third lot, it's a subdivision.
Subdivision, okay.
Right.
okay, all right. I got it.
Okay.
Yeah. Bring us up.
Barlow.
Len and I talked about this a little bit. There are instances where you may have a parcel of land and a private lane goes through to serve the back parcel. And the front parcel may have road frontage and doesn't want to be involved with sharing or having a road maintenance agreement and that kind of thing. So there are instances where a private lane, in other words, what I'm afraid of, if you say that it has to serve both lots, you kind of preclude them. Most of the people don't want to hear me anyway, Tom. I think there are some instances to where that, I think it's going to be more of a burden, whereas there are places that rear lot could be served by a private lane, whereas the front lot doesn't have to be. And by putting that in there, you make them both have to use it. It's just a thought.
Right, so after Mr. Barlow and I talked, and the packages had already gone out, we agreed that, and we just haven't gotten to that part yet. But the first sentence of the bold text under the definition of private lane, we can strike that just based on what Mr. Barlow is indicating. Where it says private lanes are to serve both lots subject to the division. So that part after we had talked about that, we had agreed that we would recommend that we strike that language from the proposed change.
We wouldn't be required to use it.
Right.
I mean, we run across it where there are instances where it would be sort of a detriment to make both of them have to use that.
Sure.
One other thing that y'all can do what you want with, talk about it, but I run into it a lot of times. The definition now of a division is that the parent parcel has to have 400 feet of road frontage and more than 5 acres or more, to be that third lot. When we started this and came up with the definition for a division survey, it was to try we used to have a minor subdivision and a major subdivision. VDOT wanted everything to be a subdivision, one lot like you do in Hanover. But one of the things I think this body, we all need to consider, is the instances to where you have, somebody may have 10 acres, or as far as that goes, a little bit more, and they could cut off 2 lots. Well, if you don't have 400 feet of road frontage left and 5 acres, then that throws you into subdivision, which I really think you should have 3 lots as a division survey and get rid of that 400-foot frontage requirement for the remainder of the parcel. In other words, let us have 3 lots as a division survey, as opposed to 2 lots, and then the residual or the parent parcel have to be 400 feet of road frontage of 5 acres. Now, where that did come about was that we were talking about if you cut off 2 lots and there was 400 feet of road frontage and 5 acres, then you didn't have to survey the residual part. In other words, it didn't have to be part of it. And I think that's how it all got combined into the definition that we have. But I see in a lot of instances where somebody doesn't have, 20 acres, and they want to be able to divide off and not go through all of the subdivision requirements. That includes put it on Virginia State Grid and all that kind of stuff. That if we went back to a division being strike the 400-foot frontage and 5-acre requirement and just be a 3-lot division, that would be more in line with what we had with the minor subdivision and a major subdivision. Just something to consider.
Tommy, what was the benefit of the 400 foot
Well,
road frontage?
The way it started out, if you had 400 feet of frontage and over 5 acres left, you didn't have to survey the other part. And it came about where if, somebody's got 100 acres and they wanted to cut off 2 lots on one corner, then if they had that, that wouldn't have to be part of the survey. Well, then it sort of got incorporated into the definition to where you couldn't have 3 lots. Whereas the way it is now, you can have 3 lots as long as the last lot is 400 feet of road frontage and 5 acres. That's the part I'm just thinking you need to consider. Striking the 400 foot of road frontage and the 5 acre requirement, and just allow a division survey to be, 3 acre lots or something. And then anything more than 3 kicks you into a subdivision, full-blown subdivision, where you gotta name it, you got to do Virginia State Grid, the whole 9 yards.
Well, does this affect family subdivisions?
No.
No effect to that. Okay.
But
Well, it does.
Yeah, what you just said.
It does from this standpoint. If you have a parcel that is less than, you don't have enough room to do the 400 feet of road frontage, then the only way to do it is you would have to let, in other words, in some cases, they would have to utilize a family division, which is a one-time thing in the county. Where, in other words, they could utilize, if they met the requirements, a division survey and not use their family division cut. That's the only way it would affect it, that I know of. Is that correct?
yeah, but I guess it doesn't really affect family subdivisions, except it would allow you to possibly do another division and not use the family subdivision.
That's the only way it would affect it, is if somebody had to use a family division cut in order to do it.
Right.
Whereas if they had the division survey and were allowed to get those 3 lots, they might not have to do this, they wouldn't have to do the family division. In some, and there again, it's in some cases.
Yeah.
It's just, you run into a lot of different scenarios, as Linda can well tell you.
Am I chomping my gum loud enough for
Yeah,
everybody?
yeah, Mr. Jarvis, yeah.
It just seems like we're making life really complicated if somebody comes in and wants to buy land. Not only do I have to have it properly surveyed, but I gotta make sure that somebody understands all this code, because if I have a vision in my head of why I'm buying this land, I buy it and then I find out, oh, by the way, I didn't know about these rules, and it becomes less than maybe desirable. Or is that just because I don't know enough about it and it's just,
Chair.
I just want people to remember that some of us are here to stay, have already bought our land, but new people coming in with all this new stuff that we're putting in, you almost have to have an engineering degree to make sure that your vision of why you're buying or coming into the county doesn't get tripped up because there's so many of these little tidbits here.
Mr. Goodwin?
With respect to that, I think we should be passing ordinances for what we want to see as the county moves forward. It is not our responsibility to do due diligence for an applicant. That's why God invented engineers and lawyers. Get one if you want to buy land. We have to make sure that what we're doing in the ordinances is what we want to see in the county, not what makes it easier for the applicant. That's my opinion. The other thing is, how does this, Linda, Chris, impact flags or pipe stems? Any impact on that?
Can you rephrase the question?
Well, we're getting into road frontage and divisions, and we've got quite a few flags, and we got quite a few pipe stems in here. Are we encouraging that, or are we addressing that?
Are we talking about the private lane or what Supervisor Barlow was talking about with the division of the parcel?
Divisions of parcels. Are we encouraging, or are we influencing the way we want it? You have a minimum flagpole going back to it. You know what flag lots
Yes.
are and pipe stems are. What are we doing to the prevalence of those?
So currently the only districts where the frontage is such that it's 25 or 50 feet are your residential districts, and the agricultural districts, A1 and A2. A1, you can do 2 lots with 200 feet of frontage. And then we don't allow subdivision, so you get into the residue parcel definition or division definition that Mr. Barlow was just talking about, and what's required for that third lot that's not considered a lot, where it's a division and not a subdivision. And so there were minimum requirements put in place for road frontage and acreage, and it even goes so far as to say you have to have an existing VDOT approved access for division and a residue. In the A2 district, we have minimum frontage requirements for new divisions of 2 lots with 200 feet, and then after the first 2, it goes to 300 feet. So in the agricultural areas in the county, there have been regulations that have been put in place to keep those pipe stems that we used to see a long time ago that are still there, but we don't allow them any longer except for in like residential subdivision, residential areas.
Okay, so we're not doing anything to impact what we don't want to allow in that area.
Right,
Okay,
Right.
that's my question.
right. We're not proposing any changes to the definition of division or subdivision. That was just a question that Mr. Barlow brought up about being able to allow a third parcel under the division definition without those minimum requirements in place. And if we amended the division definition, I believe we'd also probably have to address the subdivision definition, because then we talk about residue parcels and,
Well, the subdivision definition is 3 or
3,
more.
right.
More than 3, I think it is.
into 2 or more parts.
So we'd have to address both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just something to consider is what I was bringing it up for.
But you answered my question. We're not opening the door. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Are we good with private lane?
With taking out that first bold sentence that the
Yes.
private lane has to serve
Yes.
both lots.
All right, so we've been at this about an hour, and we've made it through the definitions, which is the first of 15 different parts of this that's presented before us.
We've talked about some of the other ones coming up too, so.
Well, yeah, but I had wanted to make sure we had time to talk about focus area plans, but I will particularly since Mr. Eglin's not going to be with us in November, so it'd be December before we really had a good discussion with Mr. Eglin about his proposal. But is it the desire of the commission to continue on working through the ordinance changes here, or do you want to see anything on focus area plans tonight? Just asking the question, because it looks to me like we're going to be talking about these ordinance changes for more than one meeting, probably 2 or 3 meetings to get through all this
Mr.
stuff.
Chair,
Yeah,
it depends on the urgency that staff and the board
all right.
attaches to this ordinance change, because if they want to see this thing happen, then we need to get through it.
All right, then what is the urgency?
I would probably put preference on the ordinance change, because these are problems that have been existing for quite some time that Linda is trying to get addressed. So I would put priority on that in the focus area.
Well,
We can push that later.
then we will continue on.
Can, Mr. Chair?
That's a
and-
good one.
and staff, can someone else in November present the focus area
Yeah.
stuff if Tom
They
can't
can.
be here?
Yes,
So we can go ahead and turn the page and get
Yes.
onto that?
we can have that squared away.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you,
sir.
Mr. Chair.
So the next item under conditional uses, this is specifically for water, public water and sewer systems. Reason being is because with this is number one, regulated by DEQ, and number two, these are questions that are already asked for any type of residential development. So think Spring Creek, Shenandoah Crossing, Cut Along. These are all questions that we're gonna ask is when someone comes with a 200, 300, 400 residential development, what are you gonna do with your water and wastewater? So these are already things that we address, and DEQ has their state regulations on how they've gotta go through their own process. So if they have to get a CUP specifically for that, our statement would be the condition is follow the DEQ regulations, which they're gonna have to do anyway. So we have addressed it later on where it basically says if we get noticed from DEQ or any type of state or federal agency regarding public water or sewer, they would also have to notify of that public, so DEQ will hold a public hearing, so the adjacent property owners would have to be notified of that as well, and that would be in our ordinance, so the notification would still be in there. We just remove the requirement of having a separate CUP for something that we're gonna tell them to follow the state guidelines.
Okay.
Any questions on that? Very well, we'll move on to Article 2.
And you've got the official zoning map.
So the next proposed amendment is Division 2 growth area overlays, and the only thing that is being done here is retitling Division 2 to official zoning map, and then relocating former 86104 purpose, intent, and exceptions under growth overlays. It's going to be on page 9 of your packet to where the growth area overlay standards are located. So it moves 86104 to 86122A, purpose, intent, and exceptions, and moves the additional standards to 86122B, and they're only A and B because there were no numbers, extra numbers left between the sections to add them. And it's just to get the regulations for growth area overlay districts together, because right now they're in 2 different places. So it makes it difficult to refer people to different places in the ordinance to get all of the information about the growth area overlay standards.
One-stop shopping.
Yeah. Okay. Questions on that?
Any questions on that?
Then what we previously mentioned was the food truck, so we would propose adding that to the matrix with the by right locations, which the 48 hours on location would be the caveat, but if we want to amend any of those, happy to do so as well.
All right.
The next,
I'm
good
slow, Mr. Chair. Back on page 9. Why are we not concerned about commercial? We go straight from mixed use to industrial.
What?
Mixed use includes commercial, but if you have straight commercial,
Where are
I'm
you?
on page 9,
Page 9.
and it's the first paragraph, 86-122. It says that
So that, Mr. Goodwin, that is the current language that is in the ordinance, and the mixed use and industrial is referring to the classifications in the future land use map and the comprehensive plan. So there are only 3 classifications, which are low-density residential, mixed use, and industrial. And the growth area overlay standards in the current regulations as it was adopted in 2021 they only apply to the areas designated as mixed use and industrial on the future land use map of the comp plan.
no commercial.
Well, we don't have a commercial designation on the future land use map, so it's not related to zoning. It's related to the future land use map designation.
Okay.
That's something that's on the pad for comp plan update.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
Take that pad away.
Kind of thought it should be.
all right.
So now we're gonna go back to page 8, for waivers and setback projections. Under D, it was originally, certain residential property improvements. We've included and other property improvements to take into consideration, retaining walls for all projects, not just residential projects. That could be on a commercial project where they need a retaining wall, and without this amendment, that retaining wall would have to meet the setbacks for that street or from the side yard, or whatever, where they may need that retaining wall closer to the property line. And then we've added, at Mr. Eglin's recommendation, walkways and structures that are less than 5 feet in width that actually cross the property line for the purpose of accessing the Dominion shoreland. And most of this is due to the topography of some of the lots around the lake where they have stairs because of getting down to the water. And in the past, they've had to break that stairway with like a dirt landing of some sort, or, yes,
Okay,
it's happened. So this would allow them to cross the property line for access to the Dominion shoreland if it's less than 5 feet in width.
so just one question on that, because of what I'm used to seeing in these kind of things. Is there a definition for walkway structures?
No.
I would doubt it, but it says walkway structures. Is there I'm just asking, is there a need for a definition for walkway structures? I mean, some things are very obvious, but sometimes when you don't have a definition, you wind up in a funny place. So I'm not saying we need one, I'm just asking the question.
Ki-
Because this is a particular, there says no setback requirement, but no requirement is a requirement in an exception. So, you know, I'm not saying we need one, I'm just asking the question. Do we need a definition so we don't get something applied here?
Yes, we'll bring a definition.
Yeah.
Just because if we were to remove structures and it was walkway, then the question would come up if it's decking, because
Right.
the stairs going down, then so we'll come up with a walkway structure definition, and that'll be presented with this.
Okay.
Can we look at the definition of structure and see if we can
Because
add?
if you say no setback required, then there's no telling who knows what someone will bring in that should require something, but they'll say, no, it's a walkway structure, so therefore there's no setback. I mean, it's just,
So we were just checking to see if structure, if we could, use that.
Page 9.
Yeah,
I
we'll,
would-
we'll bring a new definition of walkway structure.
yeah, it just seems like, yeah. I hate to make the ordinance bigger, but sometimes,
No, that makes sense. It's, good catch.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Goodwin,
top of the page in red, does that cross the property line onto Dominion shoreline adjoining Lake Allen apply to everything in that paragraph or only walkway structures? We talking about retaining walls that?
No, it's a separate box.
Yeah, just the walkway structures.
Yeah, you can't see it because it carried over to the page, but if you go to the previous page, it's in its own box.
Okay, so we're gonna allow home extensions within 24 inches of a property line, am I reading that right? The first box,
projections.
The uncovered steps, stoops, roof extensions, that's in the current ordinance, and what this is, these are setback projections, so it's not that they can be 24 inches from the property line, but they can go into the setback 24 inches.
okay. Okay, I got it.
It's all in the detailing.
I'm glad I don't do your job.
And that is
I'm glad I
not,
don't do their job. I just,
and these are intended to really be for the projection amounts into the setback or the exception. They still get the required setback,
Yeah.
which is supposed to include roof overhangs and gutters. But on the chance that the contractor shifts the house slightly and we can do an administrative projection under this, there is a fee for it, they get charged for it, but it just doesn't go through a whole variance type of process because our setbacks are measured from like the gutters and not the foundation. So it's to take into consideration any potential little shifts.
I got it.
all right, we ready to move to Division 5?
So next section, 8622A and B, Linda already went over it. We moved it from the other location here, so it's all in the same section. The next one, the zoning districts and land uses. This is the one where, of course, everything we mentioned previously, the matrix and otherwise, so the permitted uses, A1, A2, which we'll circle back to that first item, but that's where we'll have to make sure we add the back half of all of these things as well. The next one that we do have to discuss is, if you go halfway down the page, in agriculture A2 districts, the yard regulation shall be, and it had residential, a structure, we just struck that out and says accessory structure shall be no closer than 10 feet to any side or rear yard.
Which page are you on?
This is
10
10.
of the packet.
Gotcha.
And for some reason, A2 was the only district that said residential in front of accessory structures.
Yeah, okay.
So this is just bringing it in line with the others. And then you want to do the 86-212.
So 86-212 yard regulations in the Regular C1 and 86-230 on page 11, the regular C2 zoning districts, not in the growth area overlay districts. When the growth area overlay districts were adopted in 2021, it increased the setbacks in the regular C1 and C2 districts from the 30 and 10 feet that we are recommending it go back to the 50 and 30 feet. And what we have seen happen, and Tom can speak, Mr. Eglin can speak to this more, under site plan review for development of existing commercial properties that are not in a growth area overlay district. It has created some very tight building envelopes, almost to the point of making that none of them have become unbuildable, but they are extremely tight, being able to fit any type of commercial structure on them. The
Mr. Chairman,
consequence of
question.
future
Mr. Dickerson.
amendments.
So when these commercial districts adjoin a residential district, is there any buffer between the residential and the commercial?
So pursuant to 86-123, the growth area standards for landscaping, it's a tree and shrub calculation, but there is no requirement for a buffer width. When you have commercial or industrial in a growth area adjacent to agricultural or residential, there's just a number of trees and shrubs. So staff would have to work with the applicant to make sure that vegetation is placed throughout appropriately. But to answer your question, no, there's not a buffer width. However, outside of a growth area, the major site plan requirement, there is a requirement when you're adjacent to residential zoning only to have a 25-foot landscape strip between commercial, industrial, and residential only. Now, there isn't a description in the code on what's supposed to be in the 20-foot landscape strip, but that goes to show you the vast difference between growth area, it's a tree and shrub calculation, but no width requirement. Outside of a growth area, you have to be adjacent to residential only to require that 25-foot landscape strip. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you.
So would this be a good place to add that? Or a good time to add that buffer?
We wanted to prioritize the items that we have existing problems that we can point to examples. But yes, that is something that we would like to add in the future.
Hanging out there.
So if you guys would like to add it, we'll be more than happy to do so. But we have some other changes, just not ones that, like I said, we have current situations with right now.
Maybe it's a good time to add it.
I think it might be, taking a look at the one piece of land we looked at yesterday.
So we're suggesting then that we go ahead and add that now
That,
and look at that.
to make part of that 30 feet be a 25-foot buffer to match.
Okay, so that would be. So question, do we want to update the C1 and C2 in a growth area and outside of a growth area to include that language? Because right now, just like Tom said, we do have foot requirement for one, and then we have the tree and shrub calculation. So would you like us to combine those two items and then spread it amongst?
I think it'd be good to have the foot calculation in both.
Okay. And do we want it in, if C1 and C2 are adjoining residential only, or do we want residential and agricultural?
I'd say definitely residential. Does anybody have?
Because that's currently what we do require for residential, so we would just be blending the two current requirements, one inside a growth area and one outside. We could have both of those. The only question would be if we want to carry that through to the agricultural piece. And the reason why I say that is because in this, for example, in 86-212-1, I could see adjoining residential agriculture district shall be 30 feet comma, and in conformance with, and list a couple other sections where we're talking about the 25 feet with the tree and shrub calculation. So that's the only reason why I'm asking the specifics, because either we're gonna have to have multiple changes, or we could do those 4 changes and then just reference it here.
Answer is yes.
I think the answer is yes, do the 4 changes and reference it.
I
That-
believe.
Yes.
Question on that.
All right.
Mr. Barlow?
Maybe I'm missing something here. Are we now talking about requiring buffers on agricultural properties that adjoin residential?
No, what we're talking about is for commercial C1 and C2 properties. They'll now, so we're dropping the yard regulations from 50 feet to 30 feet, but 25 feet of that will be required to have a vegetative buffer that will use the tree and shrub calculation that we have.
So the buffer's on the commercial property, not the agricultural?
Correct. That's at least what we're talking about right here.
All right.
The next page, it's the C2 version, and the same, adding what was already in the matrix all the way down. And same thing, the agriculture in the A2 growth area, which we can get back to that one. And then we also removed, what page are we on, 12? Yeah, on page 12, in the C1 growth area, C2 growth area, industrial, I1, I2, we've removed the residential, so the single-family dwelling detached, the accessory dwelling, single-family detached again, and then we just added food trucks in the other ones. So just taking the residential uses out of the commercial industrial areas and then adding the food trucks in there. Do you want to change something?
I was just gonna go to those sections, thank you.
And then, now you're up, because it's the subdivisions though. Oh, and then, oh, last one, and I'm sorry I missed it, on page 11, we do have in there, this is actually from one of the last PUDs that we had. So if someone is applying for rezoning for PUD, you all may remember there's a lot of issue with environmental impact study. There is no environmental impact study. It is a phase 1 or a phase 2. So we just decided to specify an environmental phase 1. So that's defined, and there's nothing else that, just for clarity. And then, now page 13 is subdivision, so.
And just to go really quick back to removing the single-family dwelling detached from the commercial, C1 and C2 growth area overlay districts. We do allow accessory or single-family dwellings in the commercial districts, but they have to be accessory to a commercial establishment. So it was in 2 places. It allowed them by right and both as an accessory use to a commercial establishment. So it's just to make it clear that it's one place and not both.
So this way, if someone owned a property, they could have a residential unit, and it would be allowed, so. And then now it's the, yep.
So we moved to subdivision requirements. The first proposed change is to 86,567, streets and alleys, and this would require that all new internal subdivision streets, that the plans be reviewed by a third-party engineer having the certifications to approve road plans and to do the inspections, and the certification on the road once complete at the developer's cost. And it also adds another unwritten policy that's been in place since approximately 2013-14, that they, for any new internal subdivision street that is to be brought into the state system, they have to submit an interim road maintenance agreement that provides for the maintenance of those roads until they have been accepted.
John?
Mr. Barlow.
See, part of the reason, and you correct me if I'm telling wrong, Linda, part of the reason for this third party engineer to approve the roads is because VDOT has decided they're no longer going to do that type of thing.
And we'll get to the portion where we require VDOT's approval on site plans, but we could also talk about it now if you'd like.
Well, we've heard a lot just here lately,
Yes.
but VDOT is dropping away from what they have been doing, which has prompted this third party thing. It's not, what I'm trying to say, this is not something you all came up with.
Correct. It's been brought up because we no longer get approvals from VDOT for road plans or subdivision plats or site plans. We get concurrence, no further comments. And based on recommendations that they have been given by the Attorney General, which we don't have access to, we thought it best to require this be done by a third party so that we can ensure by the certification and the engineer's stamp and seal on both the plans, and then a third party that they have to, that they're responsible for to provide the inspection reports and the final certification that it has been built to VDOT standards.
And this is also a practice that we've used for Spring Creek as well as Lake Anna Plaza.
Right. Anytime that a private road waiver has been granted by the Planning Commission, those roads still have to be constructed to VDOT subdivision street standards. So we already use this practice for those types of subdivision streets that they want to keep private because VDOT in the past would not review them anyways. So we've been doing this, like Chris said, for Spring Creek. Most recently, the Planning Commission did a private road waiver, I think last year, for Sunset Point, which was coming off of an existing private road system in Blue Water. So we've been doing this in those circumstances anyways.
So just establishing it so everyone would have to do it this way instead of requiring to go through VDOT if VDOT is not going to assist with that.
Okay. Mr. Brooks.
I was wondering what the driver was of this. I guess I haven't found out. So VDOT is not reviewing plans or approving plans now, is that correct? So, huh?
Yeah, that's,
Okay. All right.
we ran into that in Mineral.
Okay. Are they doing inspections, or is that fall in each county's lap to do now?
So our understanding is they would come and inspect a road when it was time to be taken into the state system. But outside of that, based on conversations, I don't think they would do an inspection outside of inspecting it to take it into the state system.
So if they do inspection, are they even going to let you know what the inspection says and what we're supposed to do with it at that point? It's just, when I was going through these new requirements, I thought we had a deal gone bad somewhere. We're trying to cover our losses. But so now the developer's got to hire his engineer.
Correct.
To create the plans. And he's going to submit those plans to the county for review and approval.
From a third
The county
party
is going to distribute these plans to a third party
to certify the work.
to say he approves. And who's accepting the liability there? Is the creator or the one reviewing it? And I mean, this is,
We'll wait till we cross that bridge.
I mean.
It
this
would
is-
not be the county.
It's third party. Exactly, it's a third party. It's who seals the plans.
Well, we got seals on the creator and the seals on the criticizer, I guess you could say.
Mr. Goodwin might have an illumination here on this
Okay.
point, so let's let him.
It's more, I guess, a editorial comment or a suggestion to the board. You got an upcoming legislative priorities meeting. I'd be damned if I wouldn't be putting this to my representatives in Richmond, who can then turn around and say, either do your job or we'll cut your funding.
Yeah,
You're being paid to do this, now do it. Now, if you're saying you're not gonna do it, that's fine, I'm gonna cut your funding. But you can't have them both. That's editorial comment and a suggestion.
I think you ought to put that in writing, and I'll pass it right on to the
I'll
rest
send
of
it to
them.
you in an
Sounded very
email.
good.
But I mean, you all have a sit down with your senator, or I guess you gotta figure out who your senator's gonna be. But you gotta sit down as senator, and you've gotta sit down with your delegate and say, this is what we need addressed in Richmond. This needs to be addressed. You don't send your money to Richmond and let them decide that they're not gonna work for it.
That's happening an awful lot here lately.
And just to go further, you're talking about doing the as-bills to get somebody to sign off on it that it's built to plan, when in the past, I don't know about here, but in the past, I've seen the engineer of record, the one that created the plans, that put his seal on those plans, were approved and used to do the subdivision with. Then that would say you're gonna have a third party that's gonna have to go into an as-built to prove that they're built in conformity to the plans.
The as-built plan, according to this, is provided by the developer's engineer.
Somebody's gotta do an as-built.
Well, yeah, but this
But-
says,
but-
developer's engineer does that.
But what I'm saying is, whoever creates that is, if the engineer of record creates those plans and his survey crew lays it out and stakes it, he can give you a letter at the end of it that's built within substantial conformity. But this third party engineer, he's not gonna accept that. It's gonna take an as-built, and that can detail anything to a little bit to a whole lot. It's just, I see this as a train wreck. And it's nothing that,
Certainly gonna cost more money, that's for sure.
yeah, I mean, this is,
Sure, VDOT
I agree with
has
George.
built now on
It's,
roads on some
somebody
roads.
needs to go to
We've had
somebody
roads
and
on my road.
kick and scream, because this is a potential, it's great what y'all have created to keep the county out the middle of it, is what it does.
Yeah, well,
But-
that's exactly, because what would happen if an as-built isn't done, then you have property owners that if what was planned and what was built are two different things, then what ends up happening is you've got the residents that move into a subdivision or community, and then what they bought into isn't what actually happened, so then we get brought into it. If an as-built is done, we're out of it. What was proposed and planned is what was built, and we've got two different people agreeing on it. So the engineer versus the construction team versus, we're out of that.
It's
But
gonna be
that's,
engineer versus engineer, and it's just,
Mr. Butler, you like to?
Here's another really big thing that has come up about these, what Linda just brought up, we talked about probably a year ago. We have done subdivision plats and road plans, and they were built to state standards. The intent was for them to go to VDOT. But in those situations, there was no road maintenance agreement or anything done. Well, now, that's been taken care of, but one of the things that concerns me, VDOT come to us actually when the minor subdivision went away. That's how long ago it's been. And they would like to see Louisa County and every other county in the state do like Henrico County does and maintain their own roads.
It's called devolution.
Yeah, exactly, that's exactly what they called it. And I thought, well, the devolution is a very appropriate name for that. But anyway, I think when we accept, they'll do a dedication. We do a dedication on the plat, And then it comes to the county. Well, there's sort of a gray area right now as to who actually owns that piece of land until such time as it's taken in by the state. I'm of the opinion the county does not want to own that piece of land. So I think there needs to be some verbiage, just like we were talking about the road maintenance agreement until such time as VDOT actually adopts the road, that ownership stays in the name of the developer or the homeowners association. In other words, whoever has the responsibility of maintaining that road also has the ownership until such time as VDOT actually takes it over. Because I think VDOT is, the last few that I've had to deal with, VDOT is looking for every excuse possible not to take the road over. And so, they're really being sticklers about, even when they have letters from VDOT personnel that the road's approved, go ahead and pave it. The new administration down there has said, no, they shouldn't have approved that and not taken it in. But from a protect the county standpoint, we need to make sure that Louisa County doesn't by default end up as owners of that road, and then all of a sudden when the road it hadn't been taken in, or the homeowners association doesn't want to maintain it, and they say, well, wait a minute, this is Louisa County's road. You own this. You need to come pave it or fix the potholes or whatever. But I think along with that road maintenance agreement, ownership needs to be maintained until VDOT takes it over. We don't want to own it, I don't think.
Ownership doesn't transfer till VDOT takes it over.
Yeah.
Just a good one.
This is a question, I guess. The as-built, does that include the easements? Are
No,
they
well-
specified on there? Because if they're not specified, then VDOT's gonna use that excuse not to take over the system because there's no easement. And then what brings us back to an early discussion, does the easement take away from the acre and a half or the half acre for the lot?
All the subdivisions that are intended to go to VDOT are fee simple. The right-of-way is not an easement. It's a fee simple. The lot ownership only goes to the right-of-way line. So VDOT won't consider it unless it's been dedicated to them fee simple. So that road part won't be an easement. If it is, VDOT's not gonna take it.
That's a requirement now. And that's also if you're trying to get a commercial entrance, they're gonna try and get you to move that all the way to the property line.
And that's exclusive of the lot size that we require.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah, it wouldn't be included in that, because just like Supervisor Barlow said, that,
Just
it's
trying
a,
to be clear on this stuff. What are we getting into until we drop a hammer on Richmond?
The
And so you
property
can-
line is the right-of-way line.
yeah.
Okay.
And you can see that on some of the newer subdivisions, if you go on GIS and you actually click on the roads that haven't been taken into VDOT system yet, but are intended to, it's all outlined and it'll say like null all the way across, because once they're done and hopefully accepted from VDOT, then it would just transfer. So all that's already carved out of the lots and everything. So we've already got that squared away.
So is this
Do we need to break
going
before
into
the
effect,
seven?
this new law?
We're
Is
going
this
to.
something we're preparing
We're
for,
going to.
or have y'all?
We have already had it where VDOT will not
Yes,
approve
and I'm about
site
to-
plans. So we're trying to
About to
address
make a
that.
break.
So we can start.
Y'all are in the middle of that now, that you got a set of plans and don't know how to get them approved.
Good
Correct.
discussion.
And that's what, later on, we'll see where a VDOT approval for site plans of ingress and egress are required, that we want to remove. For that same reason, is that if we can't get approval, because they won't give approval, they'll only provide a letter, then we've just made an ordinance that is impossible to approve anything that comes through that way.
I mean, this is just, you talking about driving up, people talking about affordable housing.
It's a
This just
myth.
blew this out the water.
It's a myth.
I mean, this is, I don't,
Yeah.
I'll second George, Mr. Representative. Talk to somebody at the state. I mean, this has got deep results. It's not gonna be good for anybody.
And then,
And unless we start blowing back, it's gonna continue. It started
I mean, it's
when
nuts.
years ago. Game and Inland Fisheries is supposed to have law enforcement on the lake. How much of Louisa County's money goes for law enforcement on the lake?
Yeah.
A whole
And how
lot.
often do you see Game and Inland Fisheries out there for law enforcement, other than maybe checking a few fishing licenses?
All right.
You're just you're letting Richmond just say, I don't wanna do it anymore.
Okay.
But keep your money coming.
Yeah, all right, so that's a good message for our board representative to carry back, so, but regarding, and our board representative can certainly work with any planning commission member that,
George
is
knows
able to address the thing, but what I wanna get to right quick here, have you all captured the concerns we have on this section so far?
Probably not all of them.
But,
ones that we can handle and address, yes.
all right, yeah, no, I
Yes.
understand there's some things with VDOT that are beyond the scope, but, so my question here, recognizing the hour that we're in right now, Ms. Smith, we have a few things left that would be good to discuss tonight. Is there any problem with us picking this up during the regular meeting under Section 8 discussion and just continuing to discuss?
Yes, sir, that's fine.
Then we'll do that. I don't see that that requires an agenda change at all because the agenda item is for discussion, so we'll just pick it up under that. And what I'm going to do then, that would complete,
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Goodwin.
very quickly,
Yeah.
we also have the option to take what we've heard tonight home and think about it and call another work session before we take it up seriously in November.
We do, yeah,
Just throwing it out.
we do. But what I'd like to do now is I'd like to close the work session, and we'll pick up where we left off here under the discussion section and finish talking about that. So, work session is closed, and we'll reconvene at 7.
Well,
We might re-adjourn at 7 as well.
Sorry I jumped back up, but this is it's so much to take in. I'm
It
not
is.
sure another work session isn't. I'm with it.
right, I'd like to call the October meeting of Louisa County Louisa County Planning. We got an upgrade tonight. Louisa County Planning Commission to order. Can we have a roll call, Ms. Johnson?
Mr. Jarvis?
Here.
Mr. Barlow?
In the kitchen.
Mr. Brooks?
Here.
Mr. Disasway?
Here.
Mr. Dickerson?
Here.
Mr. Qualls?
Here.
Mr. Goodwin?
Here?
Mr. Kersey?
Here.
Mr. Purcell?
Here.
Thank you. Would you all please rise while we have the invocation led by Commissioner Dickerson, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Brooks.
Let us pray. Father God, thank you for bringing us together tonight. Be with us as we deliberate. Give us the wisdom of King Solomon to make good decisions so we may have Louisa County better than we found it when we leave this place. And Father God, grant us all safe travels home when the meeting's over. In your most holy name we pray. Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll move on to approval of the agenda. We have the agenda before us here. Do I have a motion to approve as presented?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any comments on the agenda or changes to be made? Hearing none, all in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Ms. Johnson, can we have a roll call? I
Mr.
just get
Brooks?
so...
Here. I mean, yes.
Mr. Disasway?
Yes.
Mr. Dickerson?
Yes.
Mr. Qualls?
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Mr. Kersey?
Yes.
Very well, the agenda is approved. We'll move on to the Planning Commission minutes from the August meeting. The minutes are in packet pages 2 through 7. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So move.
And second?
Second.
Moved
Mr.
and
Chair.
seconded. Moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Do we have any comments on the minutes?
I will not be voting since I was not present at that meeting.
Very good. All right. And Ms. Johnson, I had one comment for Mr. Brooks. I'm not sure there, not Mr. Brooks, Mr. Eglin. Boy, I'm gonna get it straight. On packet page 6, second paragraph from the top, after that paragraph, there's a parenthetical that says, "I need to listen to this part of the meeting." Have we satisfied that requirement?
Yes, I can.
All right, so we can strike that then? We're happy?
It has been listened to.
All right, very good. Any other changes to the minutes? All right, no other changes, then can we have a roll call vote on approving the minutes as amended?
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Disasway?
Yes.
Mr. Dickerson?
Yes.
Mr. Qualls?
Yes.
Mr. Kersey?
Yes.
All right. Next item is consent agenda. We do not have a consent agenda this evening, so we'll move on to the public address period. Public address period is the time that is available for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on anything that is not a public hearing this evening. There will be a separate time to address the Planning Commission for public hearing items. So I'm going to open the public address period here. Public address period is open. If anyone would like to address the Planning Commission on an item that is not a public hearing, please come forward, state your name and your voting district, and you'll have 3 minutes.
I hope everyone's doing well. My name is Amber Groom. My voting district is Mineral, Virginia. I would like for the zoning to change for C1 properties. I just purchased a C1 property so I can continue my small business. I own a food truck right now locally here in Louisa County. I started it 3 years ago, and I would very much appreciate if I could use the property I purchased to grow my small business. And also, I speak for all the other food trucks in this county.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to address the Planning Commission? Very well, then I'm going to close the public address period. Public address period's closed. We have unfinished business, that being tonight the small area plans that we had in the work session we did not get to. Thank you, Mr. Eglin, for producing those for our consideration, and we will take those up at a future meeting. Look at them then. I don't believe there's any other unfinished business at this time. Very good. So we can move on to the public hearings. The first public hearing is rezoning 2024-04, Swamp Bottom LLC Proffer Amendment Request. Ms. Moyer.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. Before you is a request for a proffer amendment to rezoning case REZ 2006-10. Swamp Bottom LLC or Michael Tolley requests to amend proffer number 4 of rezoning 2006-10 to remove the requirement for a planted Leland cypress tree buffer on Lot 8. Due to wet conditions of that area of land, the proffer requires the applicant to plant a buffer of Leland cypress northwest and outside of the natural buffer easement to supplement the screening of the natural buffer. The applicant would like the proffer removed for Lot 8 as this planted buffer was in addition to the proffered 50-foot natural buffer. A site visit was conducted by staff on August 5th, 2024, confirming the proffered 50-foot natural buffer does exist. Lot 8 and the existing dwelling was shielded from view with the natural buffer. Pictures from the site visit were included in your packet, and they're also on the screen. So you can see on this one is from Chopping Road, and then the other one is like at the corner of Chopping and Dove Hollow. And then this was directly from Chopping Road. You can't see through the natural buffer. There is a house there. You can't see it from the road at all. The neighborhood meeting was held in the Louisa County Public Meeting Room on September 11th, 2024, which 0 individuals attended. And this shows the proffers. This is just affecting proffer number 4. Proffer 3 is still existing, where the applicant must leave undisturbed 50-foot natural buffer easement along State Route 625, which is right here in the pictures. That concludes staff's report, and the applicant is also here to answer any questions.
Ms. Moyer, let me just clarify something here, because you've been saying that this highlighted area, or this buffer, is on Lot 8. According to the plats, it's on Lot 11. Is there?
Some of the lots were combined, and so I believe, was it a total of 8 instead of 11?
Right, so the exhibit that was part of the rezoning application was for 11 lots, but when the final subdivision plat was done, excuse me, it only ended up being 8 lots.
I see.
So this is from the exhibit that was part of the rezoning package that showed the proffered items. So it is on Lot 8. It was the conceptual plan that had a Lot 11.
I see. Okay, I understand now. All right. Any other questions for staff at this time?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Goodwin?
unless I missed it, is there a staff recommendation on this?
No, sir. We're not doing staff recommendations.
Is this the same, Mr. Chair, follow-up, is this the same phenomenon what we're getting with VDOT? We cut you all's funding for what you're not doing.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
I think when the new director took over, we stopped doing staff recommendations.
We'll have to talk to the finance director.
All right, then, what I'd like to do is regain control of the meeting here. Let me move on to the public address, or public comment period. So I'm going to open the public comment period now. Public comment period is open and as is our method of doing business. The first speaker is the applicant. The applicant will have 10 minutes to speak, and then we can hear from members of the public after that. So is the applicant here to address us? Please come forward. You'll have 10 minutes to present this request.
Afternoon, everybody. I would love to take all 10 minutes, but they did such a great job. I don't feel like they've left anything out. I've taken this over from my father when he passed, and I'm trying to get it closed up to move on down the road. And as I was planting the buffer on lot 1, we crossed the road to plant the buffer on lot 8. And in the second hole I drilled, it filled up with water. And so standing there in the woods in the middle of the summer, I'm like, well, these trees aren't going to last. And so I just, in my eyes, didn't feel like they were needed because the house wasn't on lot 11 when it was filed this way. They're combined. The house is further off the road, and I guess 18 years later, it looks like those woods have filled in rather nicely for the natural buffer.
Not in this area.
That's really all I had to add. I don't.
All right.
They did a really good job presenting it.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Would anyone, member of the public, like to speak on this? Very well. Then we normally bring it back to the applicant after the public's spoken to allow them to address anything they heard. I take it you don't need to address anything you just didn't hear. So I'm going to close the public comment period now. Public comment period is closed and bring it back to the commission. I do have a question or two. I was out there yesterday taking a look, so so this clears up a lot of things that several lots have been combined. I understand that. On the plat, the highlighted plat, there's a statement at the bottom that says buffer on lot 1 has been planted. When was that buffer planted on lot 1? Do we know? Yes.
I would say roughly about 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
I would think so, yes, sir.
And what was that planted in?
Leland cypress? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, I was just curious because I didn't see any Leland cypress growing there on lot 1, and you can see that house clearly from the road. There's no buffer at all
You
there.
can definitely see it clearly. I don't know what's alive now after they're planted.
So I guess the next question is there any requirement, and I'm not sure I see it here, but is there any requirement to maintain the buffer here? And if there's no requirement, why do we put a buffer in here? And I know this is several years old. I'm just trying to understand where we are.
Believe me, I'm muddling my way through it as well. That's you guys telling me.
I guess I need to hear from either Ms. Moyer or Mr. Eglin or Ms. Buckler on that.
So it is proffered that they would leave the undisturbed 50-foot natural buffer, and then the Leland, it just says that the minimum height is 5 feet. I don't see anything in there that requires them to maintain it.
So I guess my question is, what do we traditionally expect in this? And if we don't expect any maintenance, why do we put anything in for a buffer at all?
This is an older condition. Obviously, now we put a lot more detail in our conditions. The expectation is that if the proffer requires a buffer, that the buffer is maintained. In this case, the developer is still here, so we're working with the developer to wrap up the remaining buffer.
Sure.
Typically, it would then go to the property owner to maintain it. When you buy the property, the proffer or the condition goes along with it. We could require the applicant to reassess the Leland cypress on lot 1 to have that replanted if necessary, or staff could make a decision that the 50-foot buffer is adequate, and perhaps the reason why the plantings did not work is perhaps they were choked out by sunlight by the existing 50-foot buffer. So staff could work with the applicant to determine what's going on. We could include this into the proffer amendment. There's a couple different things we could do.
Well, clearly, on lot I would just call it Lot 11 because that's where the other buffer is. Clearly, that buffer is in good shape, and you can't see anything from that. So I'd say they've satisfied that requirement quite well. But Proffer 3 calls for undisturbed 50-foot buffer. I can't tell how much of it's been disturbed on Lot 1 there, but Lot 1, you can see that house quite well from the road. So, and there's no, I looked as well as I could see without walking on the property, and which I didn't think would be appreciated. So I could not see any illegal in Cypress. Been 2 years old, I would think they would have been tall
Chairman,
enough to
yeah.
see. So it sounds like to me, or seems like to me, that they didn't survive. So I don't know. I'm just, at that point, I thought, and I was scratching my head, I'm not sure what it is that we typically require of maintenance and that sort of thing if we have it put in. So I don't know.
Chairman, I'd like to ask the applicant whether or not they'd be willing to reevaluate.
Mr. Goodwin?
I have a question for the applicant too, so.
Okay.
If you would, sir. If we were, it's hard to make a judgment on this. I did not do a site visit. These are deciduous trees. I don't know what it's going to look like in 3 months. But if we were to accept this, your request, are you willing to also amend the proffer to say that you'll replant and maintain those Leland cypress trees, which is what we require of all applicants now, not to replant, but to maintain? Are you willing to proffer that you'll go out there and replant the damaged ones and maintain that buffer for the lifetime?
So excuse my ignorance, but yes, I will agree to replant. I am trying to, I guess I don't understand the process to turn this over to the people who have bought this, every lot, and I guess I've got to turn it over to them and whatnot. I don't want to take responsibility of keeping them up for the rest of my life, so do I need to pass that on to the property owner? Is that how that?
Chair, the CUP goes with the property, along with the proffer, so whether it's a homeowners association or whatever, they have to pick it up if you agree to it tonight. I'm asking you, until that time that it transfers over, are you willing to go out and replant the trees that did not make it and maintain them until it's transferred, if we give you permission to use this existing buffer on this lot, Lot 8 or 11?
Yes, sir. I mean, I don't really feel like I have a choice, but I mean, yeah, I'll do it.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you,
so
Mr. Chair.
in order to clarify this, I believe Lot 1 has been sold.
It has been, but
And
if,
someone lives there, so I don't know how.
I don't know how to get off the hook. I don't know
how
the
they might
process
feel
to.
about somebody coming in and planting. I mean, they have a responsibility to have the buffer there. So it seems like, I don't want to get this tagged to the wrong person. That's the only problem.
And I don't mind talking to that property owner.
Mr. Quarles?
Mr. Chairman, this is an amendment to a proffer that's already been established.
Mm-hmm.
The proffer follows the land. So if they bought the land, the proffer was already in place, correct?
It was.
So they're beholding to that proffer until such time is changed.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's not amended, if we don't agree to it, they still have to abide by it,
I understand.
the original proffer agreement.
Mr. Chairman, point of order, though.
Mr. Jarvis?
When this proffer was originally done, it didn't have the little words that had to be maintained.
I understand.
So, I'm just saying.
And because it didn't, that's why I was asking the question, what is the general expectation? So, that's all. So I don't know, and I know we're just working through this.
Yeah, no
I know
worries.
The request is, I'll call it, the request is on Lot 11, and I don't have a problem dealing with that request. I just happen to note that it was unclear to me that any work had ever been done, because
And I agree. I don't come up here often, but the last time I was up here, I rode by and noticed quite a few dead. And so that was kind of a decision-making going where I'm going now, knowing that the ones I'm trying to get amended
Right.
would certainly not live in a wetland.
Yeah, so that's why, I recognize that on lot 11, if that's a wetland. Lot 1 is a good bit higher.
Yeah, oh, no,
So
absolutely,
it should-
100%.
Yeah, it should drain better and not be a
And I
problem.
have no problem, I'm just trying to see my way.
So my question to get to the end of this thing, because we're trying to deal with lot 11,
Yes, sir.
and I'm bringing something up on lot 1. But my question for the community development, I guess, is, should something be done for lot 1? Whether, and that's probably outside the action we're taking here, but should we go back and do something on lot 1 to try and restore what was supposed to be? Well, that's.
So, Chairman, upon further clarification with Director, when the Lot 1, the buffer was installed as required by the proffer prior to the certificate of occupancy. And so at that time, when the CO was given, the proffer was completed. Obviously, today, when we create these conditions, we put in the additional language that whoever maintains, or the owner or developer, whatever word we use, is responsible for maintaining the vegetation. It was not done at that time. So community development staff could absolutely, in coordination with the county attorney's office, determine whether, A, the proffer has been met based off how it was written, and if it has not been met, then obviously we could open up a code investigation and contact the property owner of Lot 1.
Well, I'm certainly not trying to stir up too much trouble, but it just seemed to me as I was looking through this that it was unclear where we were. So, addressing my attorney here, Ms. Smith, I think this question is, on Lot 1, is probably outside the proceeding here tonight, but.
Right.
So, we'll just take it outside the proceeding then, and just deal with what we have on Lot 11 and move
Okay.
forward then.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Goodwin?
I'm trying to work through this too.
Mm-hmm.
The requirement that gave way to the proffer, was for the subdivision, not the lot.
Okay.
So it's not the lot owner. It's the applicant who created the subdivision who proffered that they would buffer that subdivision, not the lot. I don't think that this transfers to the lot owner. I think it goes back to the developer who created the subdivision and agreed to put in a buffer. I don't understand how this one lot owner is now even involved in the buffer. The buffer was not for lot 1 or whatever lot number it is. The buffer was for the subdivision.
Can we
Ma'am,
get a
am I
clarification
right
from
in
that?
what I'm saying?
I think we got a couple issues here. First, we have to look at how it was originally written. And if it's written to have a buffer, and the buffer was done at the time, and there's nothing that says anything about maintenance of that, that's what we need to look at and see on this one first.
Yeah.
Like, who is responsible for maintaining if there's nothing in the original proffer that says to maintain?
Yes, ma'am, and I understand that. What, if I can continue, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Mr.
I
Goodwin.
understand that. The question is, at this point in time, that proffer, without the maintenance agreement, was for the subdivision, which was being created by the applicant. Because one lot has been sold in there, it doesn't transfer. The responsibility is still for the developer of the subdivision. And the question that we want to put before him, is he willing now to accept a maintenance clause? And I maintain it's still his responsibility, because the proffer was not to buffer a single lot. It was to buffer a subdivision. That's the way the ordinance is written.
If I may jump in, so the proffer specifically states, in addition, the applicant will plant a buffer of Leland cypress northwest and outside of the natural buffer easement. And so it was not for, it was the applicant applying for the subdivision. The subdivision may or may not have an HOA. I believe that the applicant is willing to, we have the son of the original applicant here. He sounds like he's willing to talk to Lot 1 to resolve that issue. And again, it's something we perhaps as staff, we need to talk with the county attorney's office to determine, is it Lot 1's problem, or is it the applicant, as the proffer states, and the applicant here is willing to resolve it, it appears tonight.
So, Mr. Chair, how do we move forward if there's a future conversation? Do we need to defer that until that conversation happens?
That is a good question. I guess,
Sir, you
I
could,
was-
oh, go ahead, sorry.
no, I was coming back to you, Ms.
Oh.
Smith.
I was going to say, sir, you could, if you wanted to table it until we are able to discuss it further.
Well, I do think we need to clarify what is going to happen here.
Okay.
I really do. Because I don't think that we've ultimately met the requirements of the subdivision plan. And I don't say that as a problem for the applicant at all, because I think you've done what you needed to do and you've come forward to make a change elsewhere, but something's happened with part of the buffer there that just doesn't exist as it originally did, and we need to figure out where we go from here on this to make sure that the thing is put in the way it was called for
So do we want to
and
see
survives.
what he's willing to do tonight?
May I speak real?
Yeah, please.
I have no problem fixing the buffer and talking with Lot 1 to maintain it. Like, I think that's, their dead is all get out. I have no problem with that. Just speaking from my situation alone, not everybody's proper issues. Doing that, I think they'll be willing to water it, so have you, to keep it up. So I just didn't want to agree to something that I'm married to for the next 20 years or whatever these trees are buffer. But I think I think also that's part of the process in turning this over. I think there's some paperwork saying I have to create an LLC for them, like a neighborhood association. And then I guess if I'm responsible for them now, that's who will be responsible for them then.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Goodwin.
if I can add on to that thought, I think if this is eventually going to be owned by a homeowners association or whatever it's called, it is that organization's responsibility to keep up the buffer for the subdivision, and not one lot owner who happens to live next to the buffer.
I think they would agree, only because when we sold them that lot, it wasn't in that paperwork saying you're responsible for this buffer, if I had to put it in layman's terms. So they would certainly appreciate it in that way as well.
Well, I mean, in all fairness, it is a buffer for the subdivision, not a lot.
Understood.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Brooks.
I don't think you can.
this gentleman is here about lot 11, is what his request is for. And from what you said, you've seen out there, the natural buffer is there. And there's no need to put in Lelands on that. As far as lot 1, that was, I don't know, this is almost a 20-year-old subdivision, 18 years ago, that these proffers were done. I guess it proffers, yeah. As far as I'm concerned, he's met the conditions of it. The applicant will plant a buffer of Leland cypress northwest and outside of the natural buffer base easement to supplement the screening. He planted it. It doesn't say he's got to maintain it for 20 years, or the lot owner is responsible for it, or the subdivision owner is responsible for it. I think the applicant has met the conditions of these proffers, and Lot 1 has nothing to do with what he's here for tonight. And I think that's what we need to address. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Quarles.
so going along with that theme, so I plant the required trees, and then 3 years later, I cut them down. They were there. So I met the requirement at the time, but I cut them down for whatever reason. I don't think that's how the proffer agreement is read.
That's the reason I asked the question, because I didn't see a requirement for maintenance, so
When
I
you-
was asking the question, what is a typical expectation when we put something like this in here?
If I may.
So, you may?
When we look at a buffer, it's basically a screening or a fence. So if that goes along with the property, it's assumed that that fence or that screening is maintained. Because otherwise, you're going against the proffer. If you take it away. Take it away, that screening goes away. So there's no time limit on it. It's assumed that that has to be in place. You don't change that.
If I could just add, so we're talking about proffer number 4, but if you see proffer number 3, it still says the applicant will leave an undisturbed 50-foot natural buffer easement along State Route 625. So either way, whether you do something with proffer 4 or not, they still have to leave an undisturbed 50-foot natural buffer all the way along the So this is just for additional.
And in this case, additional, on Lot 1, additional is needed because what's along Lot 1 is thin to non-existent, so, yeah. So that was why I just asked the question. Mr. Goodwin.
Mr. Chairman, it seems like to me, I'm going to, number 1, agree with Commissioner Brooks on the letter of the law. I'm not going to agree on the spirit of the law, which is what we are talking about. The spirit of the law was that we wanted to create a subdivision that is buffered.
Yeah.
Yes, letter of the law, earlier editions did not address maintenance. Spirit of the law, we wanted it, we expected it to be maintained, and for it to be a buffer in perpetuity. Where we're trying to get from letter of the law to spirit of the law is to try to come up with some agreement with the original, well, the son of the original applicant, to say, how can we go back and get to the spirit past the letter? And that's what I think we're struggling with, Mr. Chair.
Exactly. And it would be acceptable to me if we deal with Lot 11 tonight in this, and if the applicant, when apparently has to create some type of HOA for this thing, when he creates that maintenance of this buffer has to go in that HOA agreement, and then the homeowners there have the responsibility for maintaining the buffer. If it needs to be replanted, it needs to be replanted. But I don't know how close he is to writing an HOA, but that's not before us tonight either. So I think, to me, that might be the answer to everything, that the HOA agreement discusses that, and it moves forward from there. Because I think that's normally the way it would happen. Mr. Dickerson.
Sort of a question for council. Is there a way we could draft the proffer so that the developer is responsible for maintaining the buffer until he turns it over to the LLC or homeowners association, and they become responsible for it? So that would cover now and down the road?
I think there's definitely ways you can change that for the future, yes. And I can work with you all in maybe changing the language of that they would,
Mr.
see
Chair?
if they would agree to, but,
I'm sorry, I thought you
but
were
I,
through.
no, I'm just saying, but in terms of, you know, like you said, for this one, I agree with what you said with the letter of the law on this issue.
Mr. Goodwin.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair, I think we also need to talk about in that planning them, because if the ones there are dead, it's nothing to maintain.
Right.
So
Part of
when we-
maintenance would be establishment.
Yeah, establish and maintain.
And I just had one more thing to bring up too, in terms of an HOA. When we have discussions with them, you have to make sure the HOA is going to agree to certain terms too, because they may not just automatically agree. And we have to consider that in discussions too.
Chairman, if I may add on to the county attorney's statement, the legal advertisement was for Lot 8. It was not for Lot 1. So in order for us to establish a maintenance agreement, we'd have to re-advertise and add Lot 1.
And that's, I'm not trying to roll that in. I was trying to have a complete discussion on what was going on here, but,
Question,
I-
Mr. Chairman.
well, Mr. Brooks.
Since you've been out there, is this subdivision completed? All the lots been sold?
I do not know if they've all been sold. There were a number of houses in there, but
So all the lots have been sold. I am muddling my way through being complete. This amongst turning it over to VDOT, think I'm close on that. As well as creating, I think it's an LLC for the neighborhood association.
They can if everybody agrees.
My father didn't do this for a living. I don't know what I'm doing. I run an electrical business back home, and with spare time, this is going way further than I would like. So, yes, to answer your questions, the lots are all sold. I have not created the HOA, and I am kind of struggling to understand what VDOT needs me to do out there. I'm on my third VDOT rep, and, you know.
The HOA is going to require each owner that'll be on board with all of that at this point.
I
in
forget
time.
what it says, and again, I've never created one, but something in the paperwork says I need to create an LLC to hand over the neighborhood to, I guess, the people of the neighborhood. I have to appoint somebody, president, I guess.
There's no HOA in existence.
No, sir. And really, the only thing holding it up is myself putting it in a priority line down the way.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Chair, banking off of Tom's comment, I think legally, this was advertised for Lot 11. And banking off of Commissioner Gordon's, Brooks, sorry,
It works.
Brooks is saying, letter of the law, he could come back and tell us, no. So I think to stay legal on the announcement and to also recognize that the letter of the law has been satisfied, I think we ought to go ahead and just move forward and take it as a lesson learned.
I agree. I just wanted to learn the lesson tonight.
I think that's a lesson. We
And
don't leave out maintenance in the
and
future.
To make sure we're covering that, and also and as I had said before, it's acceptable to me to take action on Lot 11, and for what's going on Lot 1, just to make the request that the HOA agreement include establishment maintenance of that buffer, so that the thing, but I mean, I can't require that. I'm just saying it would,
It would be nice.
it would be nice if that included that. So pardon?
Your supervisor wants to leave.
Mr. Barlow.
Just a point of clarification. In the A2 zone, buffers are no longer required now, so it's just something to think about. The buffer ordinance went away in the A2 zone. I don't remember the exact, was it 2021? When the buffers were done away with. I realize it's still in as a proffer, but they're no longer required per the ordinance now.
Very well, then. Are there any other comments on this?
I just have one.
Mr. Jarvis?
Of course, I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night, so what I'm about to say is probably something. I don't think you can do a homeowners association after the fact of selling all the lots unless you get each of the owners to agree to form a homeowners association, because that's usually part of the paperwork you get when you buy the land initially. So that's maybe a technical issue,
Well,
just as a FYI.
all right. No other comments? It was unclear to me, but I think I know whose district this is, but it was unclear to me. I think it's my district, isn't it? That's
No,
what I thought.
Mr. Chairman, it lies in Louisa
Oh, well,
district.
how about that? You know, it was, had to be one of the two of us. But, so the chair.
Supervisor Woodward and I attended with staff and reviewed this. I believe you all have had more conversation than we did out there. Yeah, the request is made for the lot. I would move that it be approved. I think
Second.
it's a reasonable request.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to approve rezoning 2024-04 Proffer Amendment request. Any further conversation? Can we have a roll call vote, please? Ms. Johnson?
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Disisway?
Yes.
Mr. Dickerson?
Yes.
Mr. Pauls? I'll come back to him. Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Mr. Kersey?
Yes.
Ellis had to leave.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He's
All right.
coming back, but he had to leave.
All right. Not a problem.
Did it get approved? We
Yeah.
put
Yes.
an extension,
Yeah.
at least until he comes back.
It's approved.
Yeah. Yeah, so the amendment request is approved. Very good. All right, which brings us then to new business. And we have, are you presenting, Mr. Eglin, the new business?
I'm introducing new business.
Introducing? Well, introduce away.
So we were going to continue the discussion about the ordinance amendments.
No,
No?
no. We'll get back to that under discussion.
Okay, sorry.
So, not a problem.
Okay.
So under new business, you have in your packet a resolution and appreciation for Cyrus Weaver. This is a posthumous one, of course. I'll read it tonight. It says, whereas Cyrus Alexander Weaver Sr. was an active and valuable member of the Louisa County Planning Commission from January 2016 through August 2024, providing nearly 9 years of faithful and dedicated service to the county. And whereas through his leadership, dedication, knowledge, and expertise as a Planning Commission member, Mr. Weaver served and represented all citizens of Louisa County during that time, resulting in many accomplishments. And whereas among his many accomplishments, he was an active leader on the Planning Commission and in the Louisa County community for the 2040 Louisa County Comprehensive Plan update in 2019, the guiding document for future growth of the county, and the 2021 comprehensive update to the land development regulations containing the zoning and subdivision requirements for future growth. And whereas because of his knowledge and understanding of the community and the zoning laws and regulations of Louisa County, Mr. Weaver acted on requests in a manner that was in harmony with the intended spirit and purpose of the ordinances and kept his primary concern for the safety and welfare of all the citizens of Louisa County. And whereas his tireless efforts and enthusiasm in representing Louisa County earned him the respect of local residents and fellow commission members, and he served as an outstanding example of public service to the county. And whereas the commission gratefully acknowledges his efforts in bringing a sensible and reasonable approach to the application of county ordinances and holds in high regard the distinction and service he gave on behalf of the citizens of the county, now therefore be it resolved on this 14th day of November 2024 that the Louisa County Planning Commission posthumously extends its appreciation and gratitude to Cyrus Alexander Weaver Sr. for his contribution and dedication to Louisa County. And that is the recommendation for a resolution for Cy that we would like to have approved tonight so we can present it to the family.
Second.
Moved and approved. Any further discussion on the resolution? Ms. Johnson?
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Disisway?
Yes.
Mr. Dickerson?
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Mr. Kersey?
Yes.
Very well. The resolution is approved.
I assume we'll ask his wife to.
We will be inviting family for that, yes. Yes. All right, and that brings us to discussion. Mr. Eglin, we can continue on now.
I apologize for jumping the gun there.
Problem.
So before we jump into the ordinance work, continuing on that from the work session, staff is required to notify you of the Board of Zoning Appeals upcoming meeting we have next Wednesday. We have a case for a temporary healthcare structure that is going before the Board of Zoning Appeals, so it's required. We are notifying you that that case will be going to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Any questions about that? We don't plan on having any other Board of Zoning Appeals meetings at this time, but we've had the last 2 months. We've been meeting for various items.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then before I introduce you back to Linda and Chris here, Miss Ambergroom has stayed back a few minutes in case you have any questions about food trucks as we continue to move on through the ordinance.
Do we have any questions about food trucks? Because we have a lot more dry stuff to talk about besides food trucks, and we don't need to keep her all night, but good to go?
No, but invite you back when we do hear it, so that we've got your opinion on what's actually going to be there at the end.
Very good. All right, well, thank you. Then we can move on.
All right, if we want to pick up where we left off during the work session, if you go to packet page 16 for the work session item.
We're on 14. 14, yeah.
86,570?
Oh, I'm sorry. So we talked about the private lanes before.
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks had talked to Linda about that. The next items were the ones regarding the separate conditional use permit for the private water and sewer. This is just what I was talking about, the requiring the developer to share in the notification if those systems come up. So that's for the sewage facilities and the private central water and sewer facilities. And then under the plat approval, it also requires that final plat shall include a note identifying if there's a proposed drain field in 100% reserve area for each lot. So it's just if there's any type of drain field or alternative field, if it goes through DEQ process or any the state or federal agencies, they would just have to notify the adjoining property owners. And we would be notified normally as the county, so we can assist with that and then just put it on the final plat that if they're going to have that drain field. So that's the 14 and 15.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Goodwin?
I'm just trying to understand this. DEQ requires notification.
Yes.
Why do we need to have it?
So this is an addition.
Early in this packet, we said we'll just let state requirements do it, and we struck it.
And then when they send us notification of that public hearing, we would be the ones to send that notice to the adjacent property owners. Just so this way, the adjacent property owners get notified by us that DEQ is holding the public hearing for it. Because right now, it is a requirement through DEQ, and DEQ would notify them. We just felt that it'd be more appropriate, since it's happening in Louisa, that Louisa would notify them as well.
Okay, I'll trust your judgment on that.
Just in case somebody were to get something from DEQ and not look at it, this is something from Louisa that hopefully they would look at it. Gives them 2 opportunities to see it, and, because these public, or the water and wastewater facilities, we just want to make sure they're aware that it could be coming relatively near them, and no sense in giving another
Yeah, the only reason,
notice.
Mr. Chair, follow up.
Yes, Mr. Goodwin.
Only reason I brought it up is earlier, very early in the package, we were doing away with stuff because the state's already doing it.
And so what we're taking away is the requirement for them to get a separate conditional use permit for it when they're going to have to go through the DEQ process.
Right.
So instead of having to get a separate conditional use permit for it, they're just going to have to make sure that we send a notice when it comes up through the DEQ. So they won't have to do the process twice, because all we're going to tell them to do is do what DEQ requires, but we will make an additional notice requirement is what is happening here.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I hadn't caught up with Chris yet. One of the things we're seeing a lot more of in subdivisions are alternative drain field systems. And we have disclosure statements for roads that school bus service and all this stuff's not gonna be provided. But when you have an alternative system that may end up costing $45,000, to me, that warrants a disclosure of some notation on that so that somebody doesn't, some of them will have conventional systems, but when they fail, the backup is an alternative. And when you bought it and all of a sudden you got to fork out for an alternative system so that they don't come back and say, well, y'all approved this thing and we didn't know about it. At least this way, it's on the plat. And it's a CYA type thing.
Okay.
All right. Now we're on page 16. So of course, here's where we said we're going to strike through VDOT approve ingress and egress. So this is for the site development plans. So we'll strike that out. And then the other item that we have is, if you look at item D1 in 86-626 and 628, we currently have Thomas Jefferson Soil and Water Conservation District in both of those. We actually now do that in-house, and we have done so for about a year and a half. Chris Nelson has, almost 2 years. Chris Nelson has taken over that plan review, so we just want to strike that because they don't send it to Thomas Jefferson Water Soil Conservation. It comes in-house to us, so we just want to bring that up to date.
Okay.
And then, again, on packet page 17, it's the minor or major site plan with the sewer facilities, just as we mentioned before. It's when a development is proposed to serve by the sewer system designated to have a point source discharge regardless of its zoning designation or other classifications, the county shall be notified in advance by the developer, and then in addition, notification shall be provided by any state or federal agency to the adjoining and affected property owners, and the county shall also notify the adjoining and affected property owners. This is the same thing we're talking about. If they're going to go through this DEQ system for wastewater treatment plant or something like that, then we're going to go through and make sure that they notify them instead of going through the full CUP process. Shore use and designation standards, you can see there, roof overhangs are not to be included in the calculation for the minimum travel ways, because that's the purpose, is the travel way to get the boat across, and if the roof is significantly higher than the waterway. So it's just something that, to address that. And then last page, packet page 18, or starts at 17, but it's the telecommunication regulations. We're talking about changing the fall zone, breakpoint, whatever you want to call it. Right now, what we require is it's 110% of the distance from the top of the structure to the height of the breakpoint, and we're just talking about reducing that to 100. I don't know what you want to call it. The industry standard is 100%, so we have a lot of people that are coming in with pre-engineered and designed towers that then when it's 110, throws everything out of whack, and then we just have a whole lot of problems going back and forth about that. And a lot of the towers now are actually designed to fall in onto each other, so a larger fall zone is not required because normally now they have 2 break points opposed to 1. So the 110 is good because you have a little bit of contingency if the break point isn't perfect, but now since there's multiple, the fall zone is already larger than what's necessary in a lot of people's opinion. So this is one thing just to alleviate some headache and argument that Tom has to go with some telecommunication developers. And
so should we include that they have to have multiple breakpoints? So they don't just have one?
Industry standard has been that you have one breakpoint because it essentially just falls like that on itself. I would assume we have not seen a tower that's over 199 feet in at least the last 6 years that I've been here. I don't know whether new towers that, your older 300-foot towers that you have around, the guy wire towers, I don't know if those have multiple breakpoint technology. I could certainly ask a developer next time I talk to one.
Thank you.
So just out of curiosity, does the industry have experience with these things? This is going to sound silly. They have experience with these things actually breaking, so we know when they break, how they fail, and whether, aside from just falling over, do they actually break off and hit the ground and tumble? I mean, I know you have to design for something, but just because it has a break point, I don't know. I mean, does it?
My understanding is, yes, they're designed and tested for that. This is in the conversations that we've had with the firms to build and develop the Holly Grove Tower, that they go through those practices, and part of it is essentially there's a certain point that if the winds or whatever become, just like Tom was saying, become too much, there's a certain part that's weaker, and when it falls, it's like on a hinge, essentially, that comes down and falls, and that's tested and that's run through. Now, I haven't seen it, but I mean, that's what I come to understand, that they do have it, the tried and true method of how it's supposed to come apart, fall down, whatever you want to call it.
Very good. Thank you. I'll still give it a wide berth. Those are all prepared changes then, I think.
Yes, and then if the planning commission would bear with me for just 1 second, I'd like to give a draft of a couple that I'd like to bring for public hearing next month, and then maybe we can work on the other ones.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask first, were there any other changes that were not drafted here that were proposed since this was produced? Mr. Eglin?
I believe Chris Kuhn is going to go over a few, but the two that I have received recently, one is relating to our sign ordinance. We have for a grand opening sign or a coming soon sign, the way that sign is defined is that it's used for a period of no more than 14 days. We have received feedback in the past and most recently from small business owners and large business owners that they would like to have coming soon sign or grand opening more than 14 days, especially when the building's going up and people are getting interest in it. To that, we don't have anything drafted, obviously, for that. It would just be to expend that 14-day period. If the Planning Commission would like, we can draft something up for the next meeting. And then additionally, we have had, in the past, we originally passed a small-scale solar ordinance. And to remind you, if it's roof-mounted, it is just a building permit. If it is ground-mounted and it's under originally 15 kilowatts, there is a code that specifically allows staff to make a professional judgment on what the buffer requirement would be from a case-by-case basis, looking at the surrounding areas, and then there's setback requirements specifically for ground-mounted under 15 kilowatt. Throughout 2-3 years ago, probably around 2.5 years, we started seeing applications for 22 to 24 kilowatts. So at that time, we increased the kilowatts from 15 to 30 kilowatts. So if you have a ground-mounted array and is under 30 kilowatts, we have a mechanism for you to do an administrative review. We have recently received a request for 42 kilowatts. And I was asked at the time when we did this 2 years ago, what will stop us from coming back and having to come back and increase it? I said, well, we'll probably be here while we're here 2.5 years later. And so that we've only received one request. In the past, we had 2 actual building permits when we went through that change. And the request we received, I believe, is for more than one structure, perhaps a home and accessory dwelling unit, and then perhaps additional things that require power. But those are the 2 things that have kind of just come up on staff's radar in the last years, months, or weeks even.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Coombs?
No, so what Tom said were the additions that we're going to discuss. But with just the length of this discussion, if you all would bear with me, I've got a couple items that I'd like to bring forward public hearing in November, some that are more sensitive and some that I think are more common sense that we didn't really discuss, and the other ones that we had some changes that we needed to make for some setbacks between commercial and the private lane stuff. We're still figuring out. We can push that, have a work session next month, and then we can just keep this moving instead of having a whole big thing again. So if we can go back to packet page 5. I would like to bring forward the bed and breakfast change from 5 to 7 nights, the building setback line, the food truck and itinerant vendor changes. And then if we go to packet page 6, the item under the conditional use permits, which is the, that's the wastewater, stormwater provisions that we talked about. So that would include the later items that we just talked about as well in 14. So it'd be removing the requirement to get a special CUP, but it would also require that we notify the adjacent property owners. And then if we go to package page 7, that's where we move the growth area overlay standards to packet page 9, just so that they flow a little bit better. And then the last 2 items I had was the VDOT items, requiring the approval from VDOT, and then also requiring that third-party review, and then removing Thomas Jefferson Soil and Water Conservation to Louisa County Erosion and Sediment. So if we can bring those items for public hearing next month, the other items, I've got my notes, and staff's got the notes of updating definitions or adding some buffers in a couple places, the private road waivers, the first conversation we had about the commercial stable versus the other definitions. We'll bring all that information back, and that can be a work session, and then the public hearing, we can try and move forward and address some of these smaller items, or the ones that we do have a little bit higher priority for getting stuff to the board.
So the items you just proposed are the ones that you feel like you would like to get approved,
Hold a public hearing.
hold a public hearing
Correct.
in November.
Yes, next meeting.
So disregarding all the others, just those items, is it the desire of the planning commission to see them one more time in work session before the November meeting? Mr. Goodwin?
And Mr. Chair, looking at what we've got on the upcoming agendas,
Yeah.
which is the focus areas, and we're looking at the comp plan, and I think we've got an outstanding issue that Commissioner Quarles
Yes, we do.
wants to address. I'd like to see us throw ourselves behind this thing and see if we can knock it all out. And to that end, I'm willing to have another work session if we can get the advertisements done between now and November, so we can knock out the whole thing.
Is it necessary to, yeah, I guess it is necessary to advertise a work session, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yes.
So,
Yeah, okay.
so just a reminder, for work session, it'd be a 72-hour is what you need.
All
Because
right.
it's not a public hearing and the board's not taking action on public matters, but you are discussing. So it would need to be at least 72 hours. So that just being said, whenever, if you guys want to have another work session, we just need a couple business days to be able to put the agendas out and everything online so that people are aware.
So then, what our bylaws normally call for then for the next meeting, if I recall, I'm going to check them here, but as I recall, it would be in 2 weeks, which would be the 24th. So let me see if I can put my finger on that in very short order for the second meeting for the month. And I may not be able to, but I thought it was in here. Here we go.
Mr. Chairman, that was just my opinion. I know other people may have others, but I'm just afraid we're going to start bow waving stuff.
Yes, I think that's probably true.
And while you're looking that up, staff, if we do call that meeting, anything that we discussed tonight that we can have updated? I'm thinking one of the things we talked about, we really didn't finish on, that we had two approaches. Had to do with the commercial stables. Do we want to change the definition? Do we want to change? If any of that cleanup we can do before the work session would be good.
Yeah, so, we could try and work on some of those items and get it to you all before that work session. But
Right.
just so everybody's aware, if it were 24th were to be the date,
According to the bylaws, if the content of the agenda for any month is sufficient to warrant holding a second regular meeting for that month, second regular meeting shall be held on the fourth Thursday of the month. That's October 24th.
but it's not a regular meeting.
It's not a regular meeting.
It's a work session. I know, I'm just trying to follow some
The
regular
only reason
order
why I
here.
say that, is because if it was the 24th, we have to get the ad to the paper the next day. So there wouldn't be but so much time for us to really change what's going in the public hearing. So we'll probably have that ad already written, just because we've got to get it to them by 10 or 11 a.m. So it's relatively early that we've got to get the ad to the paper. So it's just, depending on how long and what we talk about in the work session, we wouldn't have a lot of time to address what's discussed in the public hearing.
All right.
So
I see. No, it's got to actually move forward. It can't be as late as it, because they have to have time to.
October 31st.
No, it'd have to move forward, not
All right.
backwards. Yeah. So then I guess that would be either earlier that week or sometime next week. Or work session.
And then just, one thing I've got to check is with the 72 hours, it may be 72
This
business
interview
hours.
is illegal. I'm under
So
illegal.
I've got to check. We'll have to look into that. So maybe what we can do is send out a poll of days that everybody's available, and then touch base with you guys and see what would be work best. And then based on that, we can get the agenda and the time frame out, as long as it meets the requirements. Because we can look at that, and if we send the poll out tomorrow, it's gonna be a certain day that it can't be before then.
Yeah, and we have to make sure that we have quorum, because we're gonna have to vote to bring it to public hearing.
There will be no vote taken at the work session.
We have to bring it to public hearing, though. I guess we don't have to. Do we have to forward it to public hearing, any official means?
We're just doing a plain work session.
Okay,
Right, so we're-
all right, then I guess
Well-
we don't.
Do we vote tonight to bring it to public hearing in November?
Well, see, in the past, we've done some official vote, I remembered, to bring these things to public hearing,
It
so
wouldn't hurt to do it.
I guess we ought to.
I
we're gonna
move
do
that
it now.
we bring the changes to the ordinances up for public hearing in November, at our November meeting.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion aside from identifying which changes they are, or just changes that are ready? Changes that are ready that,
I think that's what we're here to do.
yeah, very good.
Not doing it on the 24th.
Not yet. I'll let you know. Ms. Johnson?
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Thistlesway?
Yes.
Mr. Dickerson?
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Mr. Posey?
Yes.
Point of clarification, staff could ask.
Where's that else?
So we're preparing the items that I listed for public hearing, and then the other items, we'll work on the update, and we do the next work session. Hopefully we'll address those first, and then, at the next meeting, hopefully I will get the motion to hold the next public hearing for those items. Is that fair?
That is fair.
And then in the work session, is there anything else we want to discuss, or only these items?
I think we need to spend the time getting these items resolved, so or getting all of the ordinance changes resolved that we can get done. I'll put it that way.
Commit to
It
it.
shouldn't be anything other than ordinance changes.
Yes,
That's
sir.
what I'm trying to say.
So we'll
Yeah.
get the calendar invite out for that work session when we're able to hold it, and then it'll solely be the agenda items for this ordinance change that are
Right.
included in the public hearing.
Very good. That's exactly right. Do we have any reports? Mr. Eglin, you've been good for reports in the past. Do you have anything for us, sir?
Community Development, Chairman, Community Development Department is happy to announce that we have hired a new planning associate. You'll have met her very briefly. She was sitting over the corner. She left earlier. Her name is Kayla Polychrones. So she will be presenting to you hopefully by the end of the year as cases continue to come in.
Very good. Thank you. I think it's fitting and proper, and I wanted to do it earlier, but that we honor the memory of Cy by having an early adjournment tonight so that nobody has to put on their pajamas before they go home, as he would say. So I'm going to entertain a motion.
So moved, he would say so quickly.
He would. Very well. We are adjourned.
You wanna find a time? You wanna find a time for me to come visit you?
Oh, yeah. I thought you were talking about the work session.
No.
Yeah,